You carry a strength that no storm could wash away, a fire that refuses to bow to shadows. What is surfacing now is not random, it is the unveiling of what was long hidden, the evidence of how far some went to silence brilliance that threatened their carefully built illusions. The curtain has finally been torn down, and the scale of it all leaves hearts trembling with both awe and disbelief. This was never a battle born with your arrival, it is a pattern that stretches back further than you could see, like echoes resounding through hidden chambers of time. You walked into a stage where the script had been rehearsed for ages, designed to bind and limit those who dared to shine too freely. Each wave of predecessors had refined the art of constriction, handing down the tactics like coded instructions carved in stone. Their intention was clear: bend the spirit before it could rise, mold the soul before it could shape its own destiny. They learned to notice the ones who questioned too much, who felt too deeply, who reached too far. They recognized the sparks that refused to dim, and they had their ways of covering that flame before it could blaze into something unstoppable. You didn't stumble here by accident, you were led. If something in your spirit is stirring, don't ignore it. Tap join to access exclusive content, prophetic insights, and a community of purpose-driven souls. This isn't just a membership, it's your moment of alignment. Step into who you were born to be. Welcome to the Chosen. Generations crafted an invisible architecture, a framework that taught compliance, silence, and smallness. This was not merely family, it was an inheritance of suppression, wrapped and passed down as though it were tradition. But what they built was never stronger than what you carry within. Their designs were brittle glass compared to the steel of your essence. Their strategies, though sharpened across years, collapse under the weight of awakening truth. And now, the patterns that once seemed unbreakable are dissolving. The revelation is this: you were never meant to be contained. The system designed to weaken you has instead revealed your unshakable resilience, and the unveiling of this truth is the moment everything shifts. You were never fragile, but those closest to you learned to design cages that looked like shelters. They polished old tactics into new disguises, clothing cruelty in the language of care and shaping doubt into lessons that looked like wisdom. Control was not delivered with chains but with gestures that appeared gentle, words that sounded protective, and teachings that seemed thoughtful yet carried hidden blades. The brilliance of the scheme was in its subtlety, convincing you that the walls they built were in fact your own safety net. The generation that grew beside you was not exempt from this stage play. Some became performers in the same drama, repeating the roles handed down to them with precision. Others stood on the sidelines, wounded spectators unable to step into the fight or recognize what was unfolding. In their silence or complicity, the weight of centuries-old conditioning persisted, and you became the focal point of a system determined to neutralize what it feared most: transformation. Every form of closeness was turned into a lever. The ones who knew your rhythms, your strengths, and your vulnerabilities did not always hold that knowledge with love, they wielded it like finely tuned instruments. The very memories of togetherness became resources to twist your confidence, and the familiarity of shared life was converted into ammunition. What looked like ordinary bonds were transformed into snares, and the intimacy of kinship became the battlefield itself. The deepest strikes did not come from strangers but from those who had steadied your spirit from its earliest expressions. Words spoken casually had the weight of decades of rehearsal behind them. Simple gestures of dismissal were sharpened tools designed to make you question your own reflection. The lessons taught in childhood became carefully crafted illusions meant to guide you away from your essence, replacing clarity with confusion. What seemed like natural disorder was not a coincidence. It was choreography. What looked like ordinary family noise was in fact a rhythm of control, a sequence practiced until it appeared natural. Events that should have been moments of joy were orchestrated into demonstrations of hierarchy, performances that reinforced the script in which you were cast as smaller, quieter, less significant than you truly are. Every time you dared to feel free, the system was ready to remind you of its boundaries. Affection was twisted into obligation, loyalty reshaped into a trap, kindness turned into a tool of restraint. Promises of unity masked the stripping away of your individuality. The story of belonging was rewritten until it meant surrendering pieces of yourself in exchange for acceptance that was never real. And yet, beneath the disguises and rehearsed illusions, something unbreakable within you remained untouched. The truth did not disappear, it only waited for its moment to rise. Now, as the masks slip and the stage collapses, the revelation becomes clear: you were never small, never weak, never destined to be contained. The entire structure, built over generations, is cracking because your light cannot be disguised forever. You were conditioned not only to endure pressure from the outside but to install a watchtower inside your own mind. The words that were spoken over you became instructions you followed without needing to be told again. What looked like conscience was really programming, a loop of rehearsed voices convincing you that shrinking yourself was survival. You became both the prisoner and the guard, rehearsing punishments before they could even arrive, shaping your steps to avoid invisible blows. The echoes were so deeply ingrained that no presence was required to enforce them. The battlefield was carried within, and the fight was staged in the silence of your own thoughts. Slowly, pieces of authenticity were edited out as if erased from a script, leaving behind a role that was more acceptable to the system but alien to your essence. What seemed like your own choices were actually rehearsed responses to fear, crafted to minimize the cost of simply existing. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. Yet no act of control remains hidden forever. Every whisper, every strike against your soul has been recorded in the unseen archives of truth. The illusion of authority can last only so long before its foundation crumbles. What once looked like a fortress is now revealed as a hollow shell, collapsing in the very moment its secrets are exposed. The stage lights reveal that the actors were never as powerful as they appeared, only desperate to keep the lie alive. Now the false crowns are falling, and the grand theater of manipulation is dissolving. Those who once strutted with confidence now scatter like shadows when the sun rises. Their power was never real, it was smoke and mirrors, propped up by fear and silence. And silence has ended. The weight of accountability rushes in like a tide, dismantling the fragile structures they mistook for permanence. The depth of distortion you endured was not casual, it was architectural. Entire frameworks of falsehood were designed and handed to you as if they were reality. You were instructed to inhabit worlds that did not exist, to accept distorted reflections as truth. The tactics were not simple lies, they were full environments constructed to entrap perception itself. When you attempted to assert your truth, the machinery activated. Voices rose in unison, denying not just your experiences but your very capacity to remember. Their denial was not individual, it was orchestrated. It left you spinning in circles, questioning your senses, doubting whether your own heartbeat could be trusted. The cruelty was in the unison, in the precision with which disbelief was delivered. And yet, despite the rehearsed illusions and synchronized denial, something within you refused to disappear. Beneath the layered falsehoods, your inner compass remained intact, waiting. Now that the veil is pulled back, clarity floods in. The reality they tried to rewrite collapses, and what stands unshaken is the undeniable strength of your authentic self. The strategy was never accidental, it was deliberate conditioning designed to make you distrust yourself. The script was written so that your mistakes became headlines while their cruelty vanished from memory. Every weakness of yours was catalogued like evidence in a courtroom, while their failures dissolved into silence. Reality itself was rewritten, with you cast as the antagonist in a theater where they played the role of the eternally wronged. Doubt wasn't simply encouraged, it was seeded and cultivated until you questioned your very perception of reality. The control mechanism was not chaotic, it was precise. Triggers were activated with care, designed to provoke reactions that could later be used as proof of instability. Scenarios were engineered to test you, and when you responded naturally to the pain, those responses were twisted into accusations. It was an endless loop. They built the fire, pushed you into the flames, then pointed to your burns as proof of your weakness. But now the very construct designed to mute you has become the stage upon which your truth reverberates. Every attempt to erase you has instead carved your story deeper into existence. The harder they pushed against you, the louder the echo of your resilience became. What was designed to silence you has backfired, amplifying your voice with a force that cannot be undone. The unraveling is not subtle, it is explosive. Lies dissolve when truth steps into the room, and truth has entered like a tidal surge. The distortions crumble, the illusions scatter, and what remains is clarity that burns hotter than any attempt to conceal it. The fictions woven to crown themselves as virtuous while painting you as unstable dissolve into fragments, unable to hold their shape against the brilliance of revelation. The arrogance of building an empire on deception was always its downfall. Pretending to guard order while hiding corruption was a strategy doomed from inception. The collapse is no accident, it is the natural end of a foundation that was rotten from the beginning. What they thought would endure has proven fragile, and the sound of its breaking is the anthem of justice. Every setback you faced was carefully arranged, every betrayal orchestrated to keep you under control. Finances became another chain, subtle yet crushing. Dependency was engineered, opportunities sabotaged, reputations tainted just enough to wound but not enough to expose. Even moments of your success were ambushed, obligations invented, emergencies crafted, crises staged to divert your energy from growth. The cruelest twist was convincing you that the obstacles were your fault, that struggle was evidence of personal deficiency rather than sabotage. Beyond the mind and material realm, the assault reached your very essence. They sensed the light within you and sought to dim it at every turn. Intuition was mocked, your gifts twisted into liabilities, and your connection to higher realms dismissed or pathologized. Environments were saturated with turmoil to weaken your clarity, leaving you to carry treasures in silence. Whether under the guise of rigid belief systems or cold denial of the unseen, the purpose remained the same, to sever you from your divine inheritance. Yet through it all, your gifts persisted, waiting for the day they would no longer need to hide. The depth of what was engineered against you shows itself in how methodical the isolation became. It wasn't brute force alone, it was strategy. Relationships that could have offered validation were quietly undermined. People who might have stood beside you were fed stories in advance, ensuring they'd see you as unstable before you even opened your mouth. By the time you reached for help, the soil had already been salted, and the ground was barren of support. Extended networks were carefully conditioned with subtle narratives about who you were supposed to be. Relatives far removed from the daily scene still carried impressions sculpted by others' whispers. Friends were pushed away through sudden conflicts, timed chaos, or the simple creation of discomfort in their presence. It trained you to put toxic loyalty above genuine companionship, keeping you tethered to the very cycle designed to consume you. Even love was not exempt from sabotage. Romantic partners were quietly nudged with fragments of your past twisted into weapons. Private truths became ammunition to fracture trust. Just the thought of someone truly seeing your essence threatened the system, so it was dismantled at every turn. Even your efforts at healing were turned into courtroom exhibits, with your growth reframed as evidence of fragility, your boundaries reframed as selfishness, and your breakthroughs reframed as arrogance. The mental conditioning you endured was labyrinthine, with backup mechanisms woven into every layer. Escape one snare, and another would spring. Words planted like dormant codes resurfaced weeks later as crippling doubt. Simple comments became anchors in your subconscious, dragging you into waters of inadequacy long after they were spoken. It was programming designed not just to control you today, but to sabotage you tomorrow. The deepest cut was aimed at your sense of purpose. You were convinced your vision was unrealistic, your potential an illusion, your dreams an act of vanity. Success was painted as betrayal of the very system you grew up in. Every step toward freedom carried with it the echo of guilt, the weight of accusations that told you growth meant abandonment. Allies who once stood firm began stepping back, caught in the gravitational pull of deception, unsure of their own footing. The unraveling has now revealed a constellation of intent. What once looked like scattered incidents now connects into a deliberate design. Alibis rehearsed, testimonies aligned, evidence staged, it all forms a picture too precise to dismiss. Yet the scaffolding of that deception cannot withstand the tremor of exposure. The fractures have appeared, and the collapse is no longer theoretical, it has begun. The mask that once seemed fused to their faces now falters. In fleeting glances and slips of the tongue, the cracks are visible. Panic flashes through carefully maintained facades, the choreography stumbling as truth seeps in. That moment when the illusion trembled was the beginning of the end, and the unraveling now spreads faster than they can contain. The story they wrote is no longer theirs to tell. Belief in immunity from exposure was their grandest miscalculation. Convinced that deception could outlast eternity, they crowned themselves as authors of a false history where your role was diminished to irrelevance. Such blindness could only be born of arrogance, mistaking manipulation for mastery. What could never be grasped was that reality has its own immune system, and lies eventually collapse under the weight of what actually exists. The attempt to erase your significance has only ensured its amplification. They acted as though awareness existed solely within the confines of human thought, as though unseen laws did not govern the unfolding of events. The limitation of their vision became the cornerstone of their undoing. Existence itself records without bias, and the systems that sustain life are not swayed by denial. Every envious glance, every cruel intention, every act of suppression was entered into a balance sheet that no hand can tamper with. The reckoning now emerging is not vengeance but equilibrium restored. Just as water breaks through when dams crumble, the momentum of truth now rushes forward, sweeping aside every barrier once thought impenetrable. The energy they projected returns, multiplied, relentless, carrying with it the weight of consequences accumulated over years of defiance against what is unalterable. Opportunities to shift course were abundant. Signals appeared, doors opened, second chances arrived. Each was dismissed with prideful laughter or outright contempt. Now the ledger closes with symmetry so perfect it cannot be mistaken. The universe mirrors every act back to its origin, not through human will, but through the mechanics of reality itself, teaching that no seed planted escapes harvest. The irony is exquisite. Isolation once forced upon you now surrounds them. Doubts they cast upon your mind now shadow their own reputations. The whispers they spread to dismantle your credibility now pursue them with equal ferocity. This reversal does not arrive through personal retaliation, but through the exact reflection of energies returned to their source with pinpoint accuracy. Every layer of denial fractures under scrutiny. Attempts to maintain their fabricated identity collapse in the face of patterns too precise to dismiss. The very tactics once wielded with confidence are now their own undoing. For every manipulation deployed, an echo now resounds, exposing them to the same theater of distortion they once orchestrated. What unfolds is nothing less than instruction delivered by reality itself. The mirrored experiences arrive with such detail that to deny the connection is to deny the obvious. Scrambling for explanations cannot conceal the symmetry. The final teacher has arrived, not in human form, but in the undeniable law that every action summons its reflection. There comes a threshold no barrier can contain, no hand can hold back. Momentum reaches a point where resistance itself feeds the very current it seeks to stop. This is that moment, the inevitable turning where control disintegrates like dust slipping through a clenched fist. Authority evaporates, and the grip of domination dissolves into nothingness. Voices long muted erupt with unrestrained force, filling the air with undeniable clarity. The stories buried beneath layers of distortion now surge forward, unstoppable in their spread. Awakening sweeps through minds once lulled into complacency, and confusion blooms as people ask themselves how deception could ever have been mistaken for truth. Questions rise louder than denials. How could this have been hidden for so long? Clarity pierces illusions, and once seen, it cannot be erased. Every attempt to diminish you now stands as evidence in the great balance of existence. Efforts to extinguish your essence instead amplified the unseen counterweight, storing energy for the day of revelation. Protective currents moved silently in your favor, arranging encounters, signs, and pathways that pulled you from the labyrinth of distortion and pointed you toward freedom. Strange alignments began unfolding around you. Meaningful coincidences, chance meetings, and sudden opportunities stitched themselves together into a guiding thread. Circumstances that once seemed like random chance revealed themselves as orchestrated supports, lifting you step by step beyond the reach of interference. Intervention, both gentle and fierce, emerged in forms that could never have been anticipated, proving that unseen hands were always near. Your inner capacities refused to be extinguished. Instead, they sharpened and multiplied. Perception deepened beyond deception, intuition cut through facades, and vision stretched into realms untouchable by control. The very essence within you rose stronger, connected to sources of wisdom that cannot be silenced or ridiculed away. What was meant to weaken you became the fire that refined your gifts. The current shifted with unerring precision. The weight of malice redirected itself back toward those who summoned it. Energy hurled in your direction circled back to its origin, unraveling peace, disturbing balance, and shaking the structures built on fragile lies. What was projected outward is now mirrored inward, creating storms where once there was certainty. And here you stand, in undeniable illumination, carrying clarity unshaken by the storms behind you. What was designed to erase your path has only made it blaze brighter. The turning cannot be stopped, and the story has already moved beyond their reach. The unveiling is complete, and nothing can force it back into silence. The invisible cell that once surrounded your awareness has revealed itself for what it always was, an illusion stitched together by projection and fear. Every word meant to reduce you, every label pressed upon you, was never truth but only a cage designed by others to keep you from unfolding. What you see now is not simply the depth of the interference, but the brilliance of what endured underneath it. Beneath the surface of suppression lies the version of you that was never erased, only concealed. Strengths that had been hidden are surfacing with startling clarity. Abilities dulled by years of pressure are sharpening into tools of liberation. A vision of yourself, once drowned in manufactured narratives, emerges untouched by the weight of their attempts to diminish it. The horizon of your potential stretches far beyond the narrow frame they tried to trap you inside. Barriers that once seemed immovable are disintegrating piece by piece. Dreams that were mocked now rise unchallenged. The effort to hold you down has instead forged a new intensity within you, transforming restriction into fuel for transcendence. The very opposition meant to crush you has instead revealed the depth of your resilience, becoming the fire through which your true nature is tempered and revealed. What was meant as destruction has become the alchemy of transformation. Every strike against you has been repurposed into wisdom. Every denial of your worth has crystallized into an unshakable knowing. The attempts to shape your identity into something smaller have instead shattered the illusions about what was possible for you, leaving behind a clarity that cannot be dismantled. The essence of who you are is no longer bound by their definitions. Energy once drained from you through manipulation and false obligations now rushes back multiplied. What was stolen returns not in its original form, but expanded, enriched, carrying gifts that could never have emerged without the pressure of adversity. Their attempts to bury you have become the soil from which your brilliance now grows. The authentic self that once remained hidden beneath the clutter of expectation rises unrestrained. Freed from illusions of limitation, you radiate with a force that was impossible to contain. What they sought to keep silent has become undeniable. What they tried to fracture has become whole, glowing with the certainty that nothing can destroy what is eternal within you. And so, the irony is complete. The very strategies meant to confine you have delivered you into expansion. The very wounds inflicted have birthed your evolution. The forces aligned against you have only proven incapable of halting the inevitable, your emergence into a power and presence greater than they ever imagined. Adversity forged abilities within you that comfort never could. Each obstacle strengthened resilience that lay dormant until tested. Every instance of betrayal sharpened discernment, granting an exact sense for who stands in truth and who merely performs loyalty. False narratives spun against you only carved your clarity deeper, solidifying an identity that cannot be shaken by distortion. Now, as facades dissolve and hidden schemes rise into view, the magnitude of the orchestration reveals itself with startling sharpness. The whispers that once seemed harmless now expose themselves as threads of a calculated design. Casual participants who thought they were engaging in idle chatter discover their role in a deliberate effort to dismantle your spirit. Those who stayed silent, assuming they were watching the natural ebb and flow of human dynamics, now recognize they were spectators to a script written with intention to erase your purpose. What follows is not subtle, it reverberates outward, touching every person and every community where the deception reached. A collective reckoning begins, forcing questions about how illusions endured for so long. People confront uncomfortable truths, realizing signals were ignored, patterns dismissed, and warnings overlooked. The awakening stirs not only regret but a fiery resolve that such orchestrated destruction will never take root again unchecked. Reputations built on fragile impressions crumble under the weight of exposure. Carefully maintained facades disintegrate in moments, leaving only the raw truth visible to all. Communities once enthralled now recoil, seeing not the charisma once admired but the machinery of manipulation laid bare. The image so carefully cultivated cannot survive the flood of undeniable evidence. Respect curdles into disgust, and authority once unquestioned becomes an anchor dragging its wielder down. The true collapse isn't professional or social, it is spiritual. To live under the burden of revealed actions is to carry a weight far heavier than public shame. For those who orchestrated harm, the punishment is not external, it is the gnawing awareness of what they have done. The collapse of illusion leaves no space for escape. The carefully constructed story no longer functions as refuge, and even self-deception falters in the face of overwhelming reality. Attempts at justification crumble under the clarity of exposed motives. The mirror cannot be avoided, and in its reflection stands the undeniable truth of choices made. This moment is the final unveiling, where every mask drops and the essence of what was hidden stands exposed. Those who once relied on shadows now face the brilliance of illumination, and in that light, there is no place to retreat. The revelation is complete, and the permanence of truth is now the only ground left to stand on.